Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap-up for Friday, April 12th, 2013. Once again, North Korea is the top story. Nothing is being done on the Korean peninsula to ease tensions whatsoever. Just the opposite. On one side, you have North Korea. It is threatening more missile launches. It is moving missiles into the coast. It is saying the launches can happen at any moment. On the other side, you have the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, saying that North Korea, and I quote, is skating very close to a dangerous line. Again, his quote, skating very close to a dangerous line. That is a not-so-veiled threat of war or an attack. And he wouldn't be saying that unless he was backed by the Pentagon and the President of the United States. This is serious stuff. Now, incendiary comments have been said in the past, and have come out of North Korea, but nothing like the ones in the last few weeks. And many of these comments are being made by their young leader, Kim Jong-un. My thought is, how does Un walk this back? Or does he just, come out and just say, oh, hey, I punked you, just kidding? How is he going to save face unless he has an attack? Another question, has Kim Jong-un painted himself into a corner? Is he going to be forced to make some kind of attack? And if we think that he's painted himself into a corner, and we don't know a lot about it, we don't have a lot of intelligence, but if we think that, could the U.S. attack first? Representative Peter King, a Republican out of New York, said that very thing just not more than a couple of weeks ago, and said we have the right to make a preemptive attack, a preemptive strike. Just this week, Dick Cheney, when talking about North Korea, said, quote, we are in deep doo-doo when it comes to North Korea. That's his quote. This is a former Vice President of the United States. Well, like him or not, he thinks this is a very, very tenuous and a very explosive situation. I mean, I don't see the United States getting into a 2 or 3 year slog like we did in the 50s with the Korean War. I think that'll be expensive. I think that we can't afford it. We don't have the people. We're strung out too far. And there's also a possibility of a war in the Middle East. I think the conflict could go hot nuclear in a heartbeat. And I hope I'm wrong. Speaking of the Middle East, the U.S. has moved a laser weapon, a prototype laser weapon aboard a U.S. naval ship. Reportedly, it can, disable, patrol boats or drones with this laser. And I wonder, disable, what does it, burn a hole in them? And could it also disable fighter aircraft, missiles? Could it also disable bigger ships? Could it sink bigger ships? This is just an escalation of more military hardware heading into and around the Persian Gulf. And just like North Korea, there are no negotiations. There's nothing going on to lessen the tensions. The major rub is with the West and the U.S. is Iran's nuclear program. The West wants Iran to back that off. Iran says, hey, we're not doing anything wrong. We have the right for nuclear power, and this is for the peaceful production of energy. I don't care what side you're on. What I'm saying is that nothing is going on there that even looks like a walk back or some type of a peace process or a peaceful ending or something of that nature. It just looks like we're inching towards war in the Middle East and, of course, inching towards war on the Korean Peninsula. You think the financial situation is much better? Well, that's what Christine Lagarde thinks. She's the head of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. She said this week, she says, quote, the economic world no longer looks dangerous as it did. It looks as dangerous as it did 6 months ago. Again, the economic world no longer looks as dangerous as it did 6 months ago. To that I say, really? Is that why the Japanese are printing the equivalent of $1.4 trillion to buy their own debt and raise the inflation target so they can desperately, export their way out of trouble? Is that why former White House Budget Director David Stockman said just this week that the U.S. Treasuries is the biggest bond bubble in history? Is that why Cyprus, that banking crisis there, is nowhere near ending? Is that why, the CEO of PIMCO, Mohammed Al-Arian, when it comes to Cyprus, said, it seems that the IMF, the European Commission, or EU, and the European Central Bank, he says, it seems they're so disconnected from reality. Another story in Cyprus that got out that Cyprus had agreed to sell 400 million euro of the country's gold, about 10 tons of gold. And then another story comes out and says, wait, not so fast. We're not selling 10 tons or $523 million of it. We didn't agree to that. I mean, if you take a look at Cyprus and what the European Central Bank and IMF think, that it's not so bad, that's a mess. That country is a complete mess. It's in a major crisis, and it may be a generation before it's fixed. And now the folks in Europe want to take the last hard asset the country has. That's going to help them out. 10 tons of gold. I think they have around 13 tons. They want to take 10 tons of their gold. That's going to help out Cyprus? I don't think so. And that is not a done deal, according to the officials in Cyprus. They did not agree to selling 10 tons of their gold for $523 million. And one last thing I want to bring up, and I'm talking about Christine Lagarde and the IMF. Sometime like in October of last year, she said, hey, listen, the country should not be engaging in printing all this money and, fueling a currency war. And now, just this past week, with the announcement of Japan printing the equivalent of $1.4 trillion, to buy its own debt and, raise inflation to a 2% target, she says that's a good idea. And the question there is, it's a good idea? Now it's a good idea a few months later? What changed? I'd like to thank all the people who comment on the site. I think we have some of the smartest people on the internet commenting on this site. I want to thank the people that use the donations button. Thank you very much. That money goes to the bottom line of running this site. And thank you once again for supporting USAWatchdog.com. I'm Greg Hunter. That's the way I see it.